So some of y'all are new gardeners. Some of y'all have been gardening, correct? Okay. Who's doing raised bed gardening? Okay. And who's here for vegetables primarily? Okay. And who's here for just pretty? Okay. I'm sorry, I gotta go. I don't buy shoes, I don't buy purses, I buy plants, okay? Okay, so first of all, you've got some handouts. One of the things that, like being here this past Saturday, I worked in the vegetable department on Saturday, and one of the things that I noticed were that people that are new gardeners do not know that there are plants that are planted different times of the year, okay? So here in Texas, we don't really get to do tomatoes and lettuce together. And unfortunately, we don't get to have cilantro, tomatoes, and jalapenos together, okay? Cilantro's a cool season, basil's a hot season herb. So those kind of rotate. One of the things that I encourage you to do is go to Bexar County AgriLife. Y'all have one of the best extension agents in the state. His name is David Rodriguez. He is done so much for this city. He's just an incredible human being. He works harder than any other extension agent that I know out there. If y'all ever go to Botanical Gardens over by the zoo, he has a children's garden there that is worked all for the kids and the Kids Master Gardener program. He's also very important in doing all the research for the rodeo tomato here, okay? So shout out to David. What you want this for, this printout right here, and I'm sorry I didn't make copies of it, it's about 3 pages long, but I'll pass it around so y'all can look at it. This is going to be when to plant what vegetable, okay? And it'll say transplant or seed, but that's why I want you to go to that website and download this. Okay, that way you've already solved part of the problem in planting by the season. If you plant at the right particular date, you will have much better success. For instance, this past weekend here on Saturday, people were loading up their carts with tomatoes, and we were telling them, baby them, maybe go home and pot them up in a bigger pot, keep them in the house, don't put them out. We've got another week of cold weather, okay? If you decide to plant your tomatoes right now, which you are in that time from about March 15th to April 1st, if you get another cold snap by then, you can protect those plants if you've got them in the ground. You can do things like putting a bucket over the top of them, make sure that they're watered in, and just cover them overnight. If you want, you can get frost cloth and put that around them, put a nice big bucket of hot steaming water, and then wrap that frost cloth around there. That water is going to keep that plant warmer, and also having the plant's roots moist will keep it healthier too. Okay, does that make sense? And I just wanted to put that out there in case you've got some plants that you've just put out with what's coming in this weekend, okay? So water is real important. If you've got any seaweed in the house, watering it in this week, freeze seaweed will be helpful. It'll help with stress. And then again, covering those plants, not with plastic. The reason we don't use plastic is plastic will transfer onto the leaves and actually burn the plant, okay? So keeping the plant moist, cover with sheets, frost cloth, and then if you need to, you could put a bucket over the top, okay? All right, everybody good with that piece? Okay, so how many of you have raised beds? Nice. What are y'all using for your soil?
I just used the Miracle Grow
garden soil. And you?
This year I had it both delivered, but I usually use the frog fertilizers.
Okay. And back here? Miracle Grow. Anybody else? What you got?
The local place here has living soil.
Perfect. Living earth?
Living, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So anybody building a brand new bed? Okay, brand new beds. All right. So first of all, brand new beds use things, fortunately I'm going to use this, but treated wood. because it's going to last you a little bit longer. If you're concerned about any chemicals, take a 3 mil plastic and just wrap it around the board, if that makes sense, if you are concerned about it. Horse troughs are fantastic. You can get even the horse troughs where the bottoms are cut out of them and just put it straight on the ground. If you go out to your farm stores right now, they have a ring that is probably from here to about here round. They have no bottom in them, okay? So you could plant directly in that. There are grow bags, which they have inside, which are a fabric. Some of those come in 3 cubic feet, so they're like from here to there. And it's a grow bag that you would fill with soil to use as a raised bed. In the inside by the lawn fertilizer, they have raised bed kits in there too if you wanted to go that route. Cinder block works one way. Do cinder block where you can sit it upright and then plant in the hole if you'd like to do that. Just giving you some ideas, okay? The one that I don't ever give on is railroad ties. I'm sorry. I don't want you using railroad ties unless you're really going to wrap that baby with some plastic, and that's just because of the creosote in the railroad tie. You can also grow vegetables in large containers like this one right here. This is about a 15 to 20 gallon container. Tomatoes do not go in 5-gallon buckets, okay? No 5-gallon buckets for a tomato plant. They're much happier in a 10-gallon pot, 10 gallon and above, okay? And that's just simply because they're a big plant, especially your cherry family. Okay, so those of you who have already built your beds and you've got some living earth soil in it, you had some bulk deliver, you've got some Miracle-Gro garden soil in there, what we're gonna do right now coming up for bed prep, we're gonna add a compost into the soil. You could use, and what I mean by add, you're going to have the bed, you're going to cut bags, lay over the top. You want a good 1/2 inch to 1 inch to 2 inches, whatever your pocketbook can afford right now, okay? And that's just putting in some organic matter back into the soil. How many of you? Wow. Good job, guys. I suck at it. Just truly do. If you've got your home backyard compost, work that in as well, okay? When you come back in, you're going to, of course, have pulled out any, vegetables that are dead or that you've just left in there, rake all the leaves out, top dress some compost. I like to come back with my fertilizer at that point. We're going to talk a little bit about fertilizer. You could use Espoma's Garden Tone or their Biotone if you want. We make a bunch. We do some that are organic. We do one that's time release. Now, when we look at fertilizer, we want to look at what we're buying, okay? So, first 3 numbers. Everybody know these? First number on the bag is your nitrogen. That's for strong stems, big healthy green leaves. Next one is going to be phosphorus, fruiting and flowering, okay? And last one is going to be potassium. It's all about the roots, all right? Now, when we flip over a bag, or maybe you have a spoma, you're going to look on the side. We want to see what other nutrients are in there. How many of you take a multivitamin every morning at night? Okay, plants need multivitamins too, believe it or not. They like it. They need things like calcium, magnesium, manganese, iron. I'll give you an example. Where I'm walking right now, over by the airport, I always stay by the airport because I love the neighborhood right there off of McCullough in that area by the mall. It's kind of neat area. Anyway, so they've got a lot of palms that are looking really bad. Some oleanders that I really want to drop off some fertilizer to them and knock on the door and say, excuse me, could you take care of that, please? So looking at that plant, that palm it is so yellow coming out on its fronds, and then with just barely any green. So we've got a tremendous amount of problem there. We've got manganese and iron deficiencies and probably some cal and mag. Little Z might help it as well, okay? So that's why I encourage you to look at the back of your bags. How many of you have grown tomatoes or peppers or squash, and you're growing some squash and the flowers keep dropping off and they never set fruit, right? Okay, that's water issues caused by CalMag deficiencies, okay? So you can't help it if you get blessed by the good Lord with some rain, you know what I mean? But you can up your game a little bit by looking at what's in your fertilizer, okay? So, an example. This says tomato veg on it, right? This used to be my go-to for my vegetable garden. I live outside of Houston, along Galveston Bay. I get a lot more rainfall than, unfortunately, you all do. Sometimes too much. So I used to always use this one. When I would, at the plant, I'm bed prepping my beds, my horse troughs, I would work this in. Not anymore. Here, last spring, fall, and this year I will use our free. Why is that? I've got way more calcium in here and magnesium than I do in this one. Does that make sense? So if you've got issues, look at the back of your micronutrients. I know that you all live in San Antonio, Texas, and there is a lot of limestone, right? A lot of caliche, right? Okay, that's got a lot of calcium in it, but not available. Okay, it's in a rock form. So the plant can't pull that in, if that makes sense. I've just had people tell me, but Andy, we have calcium in our soil. Yes, but not in a form that the plant can get to, if that makes sense. So read your bags. The other thing too, I'm not a very good salesperson in that this one right here is a 733, and this one right here is a we've got our 493, right? These are two that are always in my cupboard along with this one. And you're probably going, why is she only choosing 3? I can go put citrus avocado out if I need a little bit more nitrogen. Just don't show the tomatoes that you're using citrus avocado food, okay? Just don't let them see the front of the bag. Does that make sense? So get you fertilizer with a good nitrogen source, one with a good phosphorus, and always look at that potassium and then the micronutrients. Does that make sense? Okay, so you've got your fertilizer, and the reason I'm telling you to lay your fertilizer out and then turn your compost and fertilizer in at the same time, the reason for that is so when you plant that tomato and that tomato taps down or taps out, it's got fertilizer it can get to. Does that make sense? And not only that, why would I make you turn it once with the compost and then turn it again with fertilizer? Does that make sense? You don't have to work twice as hard for any reason, okay?
Just repeat that.
Sure. You want to top dress with your compost, then put your fertilizer over the top of your compost. Just work it all in at one time. Okay? If you are doing a plant in a container, and let's say that this pot had been filled with broccoli, okay? Your broccoli's done. You're going to put broccoli out, take the pot over to the wheelbarrow, turn it over. If it's got a lot of roots in there, pull the roots out, if that makes sense. Get all as much as you can, shake off the good potting soil that was in there, get you some good compost, and work it back into that potting soil. You can reuse potting soil unless you've had a disease or an insect problem. Does that make sense? Potting soil is not cheap. Don't throw it away, if that makes sense. If it's too root bound, like these 3 pots were very root bound, my hanging baskets, I mean, look at what the roots did when I pulled them out, okay? Then you can throw that into the compost pile, if that makes sense. Mix in some compost, your fertilizer, and put it back in the pot to pot up. Does that make sense? Everybody okay with that? Okay. When you go to plant your plants, it's very important. I'm going to torture you, and I'm sorry. So, when we go to plant plants, there are some of us in our industry that like to rip at roots. I'm not a ripper, okay? I'm more of a massage the root system, okay? I don't pull at them and pull them apart. I have friends that do that. I don't do that. I just kind of massage it and loosen it up a little bit. When you plant your plants, with the exception of tomatoes, you are not going to plant this plant any deeper than it is right there, okay? Don't plant it up here and bury part of that, and don't plant it to where it's up here standing out, okay? Just to the soil line. Does that make sense? On a tomato plant, you can do that. You could take your tomato plants, I should have grabbed one of those, and you can bury them up a little bit deeper. And right here, you'll pick off the leaves buried up a little bit deeper, and you're getting more root system. You can also take a tomato plant. Dr. Tom Leroy from A&M, he loves doing it that way. He likes to turn them on their sides and plant them. And the reason he does that, so if it was like up this way and you turned it here, I told you I was going to torture the plant. You're going to cover the soil right here. You water, that water is going right to the piece of root system. Does that make sense? That's what he does. It's tried and true. He laughs at me because I like to repot tomatoes and then just dig deeper holes and plant them deeper, just to make a sturdier root system. But other than that, all other plants, you do not plant them any deeper than what the grower grew them in. Same thing, if y'all buy a tree or a shrub, and this happens at just about every garden center, trees and shrubs get knocked over with the wind and they get stood back up, and a worker will just pick that soil up and throw it back over the top of it. Sometimes we get plants that get a little bit up around where their actual natural root system is. We don't want to do that because we can cause issues. If I had it my way, I would go around at night to every hotel, business building, hospital, and I would pull the mulch off of those plants where they have been stacked up right up and around their necks. Have you seen that? That's not appropriate. It actually causes damage to the plant. And that's just like when you plant a tree, you want to look for the root flare. Like when you were kids and you would draw the tree with a little bit of a curl to it, you want that root flare out. You don't want to put a turtleneck on it. Okay. When you go to plant your plants in your raised beds or your containers, it's always really helpful if you'll take a little bit more fertilizer and right underneath, if you'll put a little fertilizer right underneath that bottom, okay? And the reason for that is just so when those roots start tapping out, they can get to some food. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, same thing, there are time-release fertilizers out there. Scott's Miracle-Gro is known for Osmocote, right? The little ball pearls. You'll see them in pots and stuff. We make one, this is a 6 to 9 month release. It's a 1077. It is my favorite for container gardening, and that's because it is a 6 to 9 month release. It's not heat activated, so when temperatures start hitting 90, 100 degrees, I'm not going to get a big flush off the plants, meaning a flushing of leaves and flowers or fruits. It's just going to be a nice even keel. And because I travel, I don't have time to be messing with my containers when I'm home on Sunday. I leave the containers alone and go play in the vegetable garden. Between watering issues, either loving a plant too much or not enough, that's one of the biggest issues that we see with homeowners, including myself as a gardener. I can fully admit that. And then number 2 is feeding, like not upping your game in the fertilizing department. That happens all the time. People will come in and go, my plant's not, fruiting and tomato's not doing what I want. Well, did you feed it? No. Well, it's got to eat too, okay? When you look at bags of soil, for instance, your Fox Farm brand and your cow manures, they're all going to have fertilizers in them. So if you look at the back here of the bag, it's going to tell you how much fertilizer is in there. So this is a 0.3, 0.5 with a 1 point on it, and it's got a 1% calcium charge in it, right? That's enough to get me going a little bit. Whereas if you look at our ocean forest, it's enough to feed for a good 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks, depending upon water, okay? So look at your soils. Miracle-Gro puts their nutrient analysis on the back of all their things too. compost, like your chicken manure, your cow manure, your cotton burr compost, those are going to feed for a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 at the most, right? That's why we need to add fertilizer. For us on an organic side, like on these right here, you're going to do every couple of weeks. You're going to come back and side dress. You could do it that way, right? Where you come back and just sprinkle a little more powder around it. Or we can up our game, which is where I